I remember when I first moved into my new apartment, I was excited to finally have a place of my own. It was a small complex with only 6 units, all occupied by different people. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, waving and greeting me whenever we crossed paths. But as time went on, I started to notice strange things happening. It started with little things like hearing muffled voices and footsteps coming from the apartment next door late at night. I tried to ignore it, assuming they were having a party or something. But as the weeks went on, the noises became more frequent and louder. I could even hear furniture being moved around. One day, I decided to go over and introduce myself to the neighbor, hoping to put a face to the noise. But when I knocked on the door, there was no answer. I could hear someone shuffling inside, but they didn't come to the door. I figured they must be busy or didn't hear me, so I returned to my apartment. The strange occurrences continued, and I started to become more and more paranoid. Every time I left my apartment, I felt like someone was watching me. I even started to notice that my things were being moved around while I was out, as if someone had been inside. One night, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard a loud banging on my front door. I jumped out of bed and peered through the peephole, but couldn't see anyone. The banging continued, and I was too scared to open the door. I was terrified. Finally, I went to my window and watched my neighbor's apartment. That's when I noticed something odd about it. I don't remember if there were ever any lights on, and I couldn't hear any noise coming from inside. It was as if the apartment complex was completely abandoned. I still felt like something was going wrong, and I might be in danger. So the next day, I decided to talk to the landlord about my concerns. But when I went to their office, I found it empty. There was no furniture, computer, or sign of anyone ever having been there. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. When I came home, I noticed a strange symbol scrawled in my front door in what looked like blood. It sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed my things and left the apartment complex, never looking back. To this day, I still don't know what happened to my neighbors or why I was targeted, but I can still hear those muffled noises and footsteps in my dreams, haunting me with the memory of what happened in that quiet little complex. I always thought that living in a small, quiet neighborhood was peaceful. But then I met my new neighbors, the Johnsons. At first, they seemed normal. They waved hello and invited me over for tea. But something about them made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way they always seemed to watching me, or the fact that they never seemed to leave their house. One night, I woke up to a strange noise coming from next door. It sounded like someone was shuffling around in the Johnson's yard. I peeked out my window and saw their silhouette moving around in the dark. The next day, I asked Mrs. Johnson about the noise. She smiled sweetly and said it was probably just their dog. But I didn't believe her. Something was off. Over the next few days, I noticed strange things happening around the Johnsons' house. Their curtains were always drawn, and their front yard was overgrown with weeds. And I swear I saw someone peeking out from behind their window when I walked by. Then one day I received a package from the Johnsons. It was a strange wooden box with no return address. I opened it up and found a note inside. It read, "We're watching you." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Who were these people, and why were they watching me? I wanted to find out. Late one night, I snuck over to the Johnsons' house and cautiously peeked through the window. What I saw made me wish I had never looked. Inside, I saw a room filled with strange objects and symbols. The Johnsons were sitting in the center of the room, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. And in the corner, I saw a strange figure standing in the shadows. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, pale and gaunt with long, claw-like fingers. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in fright. And then I saw it. The figure was looking right at me. Its eyes were empty and lifeless, but I could feel its gaze piercing into my soul. I stumbled backwards and ran home as fast as I could. I didn't sleep that night and couldn't sleep for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure staring back at me. The Johnsons never spoke to me again after that night, but every once in a while I'll catch a glimpse of their curtain moving or hear strange noises coming from their yard. Because of the constant surveillance from the Johnsons, I had to move out. I had a feeling that they were planning something big, something that would make their previous actions seem trivial. As I packed my bags, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that they are watching me, and that every move I made could be my last. My husband and I just moved into a new house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our neighbors seemed friendly enough, waving to us as we moved our boxes inside. But something about them made me a little nervous. Maybe it was the way they always seemed to be watching us even when they thought we weren't looking. We settled into bed early on the first night in our new home. I was exhausted from the move, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was too quiet. No crickets chirping outside, no distant sound of traffic, just the sound of our own breathing and the creak of the old house settling. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. My heart pounded in my chest as my husband got up to answer it. But when he opened the door, there was no one there. Just an empty porch and a cool breeze. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but I knew it wasn't. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Our furniture would be moved slightly when we came home from work, as if someone had been sitting in our chairs. We would hear footsteps in the hallway at night, but no one was there when we turned on the lights. And our neighbors would always seem to be outside watching us. One night, my husband woke me up in a panic. He had heard something outside our bedroom window, scratching at the glass. We searched the yard with flashlights, but there was no sign of anything. We went back to bed, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was watching us from outside. The next day, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I knocked on our neighbor's door and asked if they had noticed anything strange in the neighborhood. They smiled at me, but their eyes seemed cold and distant. "No, nothing out of the ordinary," they said. But as I turned to leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a small room tucked away in the back of their house, with no windows and a heavy, locked door. That night my husband and I sat in our living room trying to come up with a plan. We were scared, but we didn't know who to turn to for help. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. We froze, but my husband got up to answer it. When he opened the door, there was a note on the ground. It read, "We've been watching you. We know you've been investigating. Leave us alone, or there will be consequences." We didn't know what to do. We couldn't leave our home, but we didn't feel safe there anymore. The next few days were filled with paranoia and fear until one night. We heard a loud crash from our neighbor's house. We looked out the window and see police cars and ambulances lining the street. Our neighbors had been arrested for kidnapping and holding several people captive in their basement, including our previous homeowners. We never found out what their plans were for us, but we knew we had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. We moved out of the neighborhood as soon as we could, but the memories of that time will haunt us forever.